I wanted to speak today about a famous Zionistic figure. His name was David Yellin, a very famous man. We've spoken about him on various occasions before on this series. He was actually born back in the year 1864 and he passed away on December 12th, 1941. Now, he was an educator, a researcher of the Hebrew language and literature. He was also a politician. He was one of the leaders of the Hayishub. He was the founder of the, let's say, the Hebrew College for Teachers, one of the founders of the Hebrew Language Committee and the Israel Teachers Union and Zichron Moshe neighborhood of Jerusalem. Let's explore a few of the highlights of the famous man's life. Now, he was born as a boy in Jerusalem, the holy city, and we can learn about that. He was also he was a researcher of medieval Hebrew literature and Hebrew language. Say he was really yearned to make a revival of it in Israel. Now, it's interesting, he was named after his grandfather. His grandfather happened to have been a famous financier and a meshulach who moved from Poland to the Holy Land, I think back in the year 1834. Now, his father's name was Yehoshua Yellin, who was one of the founders of the Mechללת Shiva neighborhood in Jerusalem. His mother's name was, I believe, Sarah, was the daughter of another famous person, Shlomo Yehezkel Yehuda, who happened to have been the son of Ezekiel Judah. So he really came from a great pedigree, let's just say himself. So his grandfather was a famous rabbi, Ezekiel Judah, who was a famous rabbi and educator from Iraq. So it's interesting, on one side of his family he's Polish, the other side he's got Iraqi heritage. That will benefit him tremendously in his life, without a doubt, with the diversity will. Now, come up, he was 14 years of age. David Yellin started writing a newspaper which was called the Har Zion, or as we say in English, Mount Zion, which was published in one copy twice a month. He sustained it for 43 issues. He later wrote for the Hebrew newspapers Halevanon, Hamagid, and Melit, I believe. So he was a writer, he was an author in various different spheres. I think come with the year 1885 it was, he would get married. He was 21 years of age. He'd get married to Ita. She happened to be the daughter of Rabbi Yechiel Michel Pine. So he really had like rabbinic, let's just say, connections all throughout his family, especially in his wife. His father-in-law was a rabbi and his grandfather was also. So those were, so he was imbued in some religiosity to a deep degree, you could say. Now let's say something about Rabbi Ezekiel Judah. In of itself, he was born in the year 1800, passed away on 22nd April 1860. His full name was Yehezkel Yehuda, or you could say Ezekiel Judah Jacob Sliman, respectively. He was a Jewish communal leader. He was a trader of indigo and Muslim and silk. He was a philanthropist. He was a Talmudist from Baghdad, and like many people from Baghdad, he would immigrate to India, where he led the Baghdadi Jewish community of Calcutta and established the city's first synagogues. I think one of Ezekiel Judah's son, interesting enough, from his first marriage, was described as a leader among the Jewish community in Baghdad. Another son from his first marriage, Rabbi Shlomo Yehezkel Yehuda, migrated from Baghdad to Jerusalem, founded a rabbinical branch of the family known as the Yehuda family of Jerusalem. Now it's interesting, Rabbi Shlomo Yehezkel Yehuda was bequeathed by his father a share in houses in Calcutta worth £25,000, allowing him to live a life of great wealth and respectability. He used his income from these properties to set aside a considerable sum for philanthropy. His migration to Jerusalem was described by would be described actually by David Yellin himself, and we'll give a whole paragraph interesting on that. Now let's get back to David Yellin over here. So David founded the Hebrew Language Committee together with another extremely famous Zionistic figure, Eliezer ben Yehuda, who I think served as chairman. Now other members, Chaim Hershenson, Ziv Yavetz, Abraham Moses Lunks, and also Rabbi Yaakov Meir, who would go on to become Rosh Hashanah. We'll speak about Rabbi Yaakov Meir in a few minutes, who would become the Sephardic chief rabbi. The committee would disband, I believe, after 1 year, but was re-established in the year 1905, when the school teachers, I think they complained at that point in time about the lack of Hebrew terminology. Now, David Yellin served as president until he passed away, and I think it was in 1953 the Academy of the Hebrew Language was established on the basis of that committee, respectively. Now, I think it was in 1903. It was. I think he participated with another man named Mr. Menachem Osishkin in the founding of the Assembly of the Land of Israel. This was an attempt, let's say, to create a representative body of the Jews in the issue. It was. This assembly only met once, but founded the Teachers Union and the first Jewish labor union in Palestine. And David Yellin was the president until the year 1906. Let's say something about Rabbi Yaakov Meir. What's interesting, he was a Sephardi chief rabbi. He would have 2 stints as a Sephardi chief rabbi, which we're going to speak about. He was a great Talmudic scholar. He was fluent in Hebrew as well as 5 other languages, and was known as one of Jerusalem's most respected rabbis. He was actually born in the year 1856 in Damascus, Ayat, and he passed away in Jerusalem, which was mandatory Palestine. He was about 82, 83 years of age in 1939. And what's interesting was he was the first Sephardic chief rabbi under the British Mandate of Palestine. What's interesting is I think it was in 1899 Rabbi Meir was appointed deputy head of the Beit Din, Rabbi Raphael Yitzchak Israel, and after Rabbi Elisha, who was a chief rabbi, in 1906, he passed away. There was a famous election who will become, and he won the election, but I think he would only last as chief rabbi for under a year at that stage in time, because there was very much connected, I think, to the Hacham Bashi of Palestine, was connected to the Sultan of Turkey, which would mean that Rabbi Eliyahu Moshe Panishiel would take charge of overseeing the community at that stage in time. But he would rise back in prominent positions, because first of all, he would get a premium position as a chief rabbi of Salonika in 1908 that will last in 1911. Also, he was elected the chief rabbi of Jerusalem in 1911, but the Jews of Salonika, I think they really wanted him, so he wouldn't take office in Jerusalem. Now, it's interesting, in 1921, the chief rabbinate of Palestine was established, and Rabbi Meir was elected as Sephardic chief rabbi of Palestine and took the position and will take the title of Rishon LeZion. He was, let's say, the forefront of the effort to revive Hebrew. Hence, that's why he had these connections with David Yellin. As a modern language, he held this post until his death, and I think there was a letter in 1936 called an appeal for friendliness, called on the Muslims of Jerusalem to halt any hatred and animosity towards the Jews who were returning to their holy city. Now, Rabbi Yaakov Meir was so popular, I think when he passed away, 83 years of age, 10,000 Jewish residents of Jerusalem would attend from all the sections of the population respectively. So let's go back to David Yellin over here. So Rabbi Yaakov Meir would have a connection with him. But in 1903, David Yellin participated in Menachem Usishkin, who founded the Assembly of the Land of Israel, which we spoke about before. He'd be the president until 1906. Now, it's interesting, he had a younger brother called Shlomo Yellin, and they were very similar in the fact that David was a staunch supporter of the Ottoman Empire in the years of the Young Turk Revolution. He gave dozens of speeches praising the reforms in the Second Constitutional Era. In one 1909 speech, he described the unity and beauty which caused the whole people of the homeland to be brothers in one endeavor, the success of the homeland and its people, and the pride of membership, one family, the Ottoman family. Let's just say for both, it was both Yellin brothers, the reforms represented the possibility of an Ottomanism that was compatible with the goals of Zionism. Ottoman Jews could enjoy the benefits of being citizens in a multi-ethnic Ottoman state and still remain their distinctly Jewish cultural and social traditions. Now, in 1913, at the time of the War of the Languages in the issue, David Yellin resigned from the Teachers' College that was sustained by the Hilfsverein der Deutschen Juden, an aid society of German Jews which supported German language professional education in the Technion, and founded the Hebrew School for Teachers. I think it actually still functions today in Beit Kerem neighborhood of Jerusalem, and now it's under the name of David Yellin. We actually visited that in one of our tours over here. Come on, 1917, I think it was during the First World War, David Yellin was exiled in Damascus, and after the Balfour Declaration was issued and mandatory Palestine was established under the British mandate for Palestine, David Yellin began to support dividing Jerusalem into separate municipalities. From 1920 to 1928, he was a member of the Assembly of Representatives of Mandatory Palestine. In 1925, when the Hebrew University of Jerusalem was opened, he was invited to teach Hebrew grammar and medieval Hebrew poetry. In 1936, he was appointed as a professor of the university, and David Yellin wrote numerous books, let's say, about languages he would write at various stages in time, which I didn't mention about beforehand. I think also connected to history and medieval literature. I think October 1937, his fifth son, Abinoam, was murdered in the 1936-1939 Arab revolt in Palestine, so really suffered from anti-Semitism. As a consequence of these events, the mandatory Palestine administration handling of Jews, David Yellin and his wife wrote in the 1939 a letter to the High Commissioners for Palestine and Transjordan, in which they explained why they are returning the awards that they received from the British government. But David Yellin, he died in 1941 and was buried in Har HaZeitim, Mount Olive's Jewish cemetery. Several streets were named at educational institutions in Israel named after him. Now, let's look at his family for a minute. His wife, Ita, was the daughter of Yechiel Michel Pines, and Yosef Miyuchas was his brother-in-law. Yosef Miyuchas, I believe, another famous from the Miyuchas family. They had 7 children, a daughter, 5 sons, and another daughter. Now, the second child, I think his name was Eliezer, happens to have been an engineer, an architect, and husband of a musician, someone named Telma Yellin. They were among the founders of the Rehabia neighborhood in Jerusalem, another place we visited. Their third child, Abiezer, was a general secretary of the Teachers Union and one of the founders of the Maccabi World Union, so they had very Zionistic positions. Their 6th son, Avinoam, was an educator of Oriental studies. The botanical garden in the Yellin Teachers College is named after him. Now, the youngest daughter, someone named Sarah Ahuva, married Leo Picard, one of the most prominent geologists in Israel. Now, it's further interesting, there's going to be more connections to rabbis because David Yellin's sister was named Sarah. She was wife of the Chief Justice of Hebron in the beginning of the 20th century, someone named Yosef Mani. Now, Yosef Mani was very notable because he was a grandchild of Rabbi Eliyahu Mani, who was one of the leaders of the Iraqi Jewish community. His sister Rachel was a wife of Yehezkel Danin, one of the founders of Tel Aviv, and his younger brother Shlomo Yellin was a lawyer, Ottoman nationalist, member of the Committee of Union and Progress, Young Turks, and strong supporter of the Ottoman Constitution of 1908 that was implemented following the Young Turk Revolution. So there was various different, let's just say, Zionistic positions within regards to that. Now, let's say something about Yosef Mani for a minute. I think it was his brother-in-law, if I'm not mistaken, another famous figure. He was known as Yosef or Joseph. He was born, I think, in February 1878. He was born in Hebron. He died in Israel. And he was the son of Rabbi Suleiman Menachem Mani, another great rabbi. He was Hacham Bashir, chief rabbi, his father was. And his mother's name was Rabbanit Reina Mani, interesting enough. So you can see that there was a great connections in itself. And Suleiman Menachem Mani, we recorded a video on before, and also Eliyahu Mani, the great Kabbalist from Baghdad, we also recorded a video on. And I think he was a member of the Kabbalist Yeshiva Bet El in Jerusalem. He studied in Talmud Torah and Yeshiva. He studied Arabic language and literature and legal knowledge also. He was appointed as an Arabic teacher at the School of Hebron. He was elected the judge of the district court and also served as an investigating judge and deputy chairman of the court. Was interesting enough. So he had a lot of also moves. I think he was a teacher, Arabic teacher in the Alliance school system. I think, and was later teaching Hebrew and Arabic at the Rehovot Colony School, and would move to Jaffa later on, and was appointed teacher of the Tekib Moni School and the Ezra School in Berlin, and at the Herzliya Gymnasium. He was also a poet, I think Joseph Mani was, of Hebrew, and transliterated various different works from French into Hebrew. I don't know if it was published at the end, his works was, and very interesting enough. He was also appointed as an Arabic teacher at the Sephardic Talmud, maybe Torah, in Jerusalem, and later as an Arabic teacher at the Jerusalem Hebrew Gymnasium School in Jerusalem also. So that was Joseph Mani, who was his brother-in-law. Now let's go back to David Yellin over here. He really contributed to the Hebrew language itself. He was one of the central people in the process of revival of the Hebrew language, and particularly active in coining neologisms. Unlike Eliezer ben Yehuda, who liked using Arabic words for creating Hebrew neologisms, David Yellin preferred using only classic Hebrew sources. He was particularly interested in biblical hapax legomena, the meanings of which are not always clear, and he reused them, sometimes changing their meaning. For example, he reused the word minza, which appeared in the book of Nahum, and probably means king, to denote monastery by association with the word nazir, a monk. Other words that he created, which became common in modern Hebrew, are words for photography, tsilum, joke בדיחה, agriculturist חקלאי, actor שחקן. Now I think with Yehuda Gur, he published a complete Hebrew dictionary in 1920. So very, very interesting. Now friends, we're a community here. We're learning about famous Jewish personalities of yesteryear. We're speaking about David Yellin over here today. So he was connected to many of the rabbis who we already recorded video on. If you feel anyone's interested in watching any of these videos, please share these videos to other people. Also, we're nearing 7,500 subscribers, which is a phenomenal achievement. And if you descend from any of the great rabbis we're speaking about, please send me an email now. I would love to hear more information. Now, as a special treat, I'm going to show you some of the scenes of Eretz Israel, which is speaking about Zionistic figures, people that dreamed of being in Israel. And I'm going to show it to you live in a second, just some footage of Eretz. As friends, a special treat now. You're going to as friends, a special treat now. You're going to see some scenes of Eretz Israel. Some of these Zionistic figures, they dreamed that there'd be millions of people living in Israel and enjoying the view. So enjoy a bit of a tour of some scenes of Jerusalem. Enjoy, friends. Over here, special treat to all of you.
לבצע תיקוף באמצעות היישום הסלולרי או בכרטיס הרב-קו בכל נסיעה. המשך נסיעה טובה.
Bye.